There's probably an elephant in the room that we have to address immediately right off rip. And
Multiple elephants.
You had an all-time bad fan weekend, as you could
Horrible.
probably imagine, with the Penn State loss, the Eagles loss, the Yankees loss. But I really want to start out with this Penn State loss where they go on the road to UCLA, an 0-4 team, a place that they just got done cleaning house. Everybody kind of deemed them as like one of the worst teams in college football. The Nico situation over the offseason, everything around them kind of just felt like bad vibes. And Penn State, we talked about last week, off of a loss to Oregon at home at the whiteout. Then you go on the road and drop a game to an 0-4 team. Wow. That's really the only thing where my head was at when the game was going on. It was like, okay, Penn State's going to bounce back. They're 24.5-point favorites. It was like, they're bound to bounce back this game, like go and take care of business. Then they go down super early. They lose a pooch kick. They go down super early and they go and they block a punt. And it feels like, okay, like the Penn State's actually going to get away with this game. Like, of course. Then a bad play, probably. It was on 4th down, I believe, correct?
Like their last play of their like the 4th and 2 possession, like in the UCLA red zone.
Yeah. So a bad call on 4th down that kind of put the game away a little bit. What I'm getting at with all of this is we had a little bit of a conversation about James Franklin and Drew Allar and the entire infrastructure last week after a loss to Oregon. And I doubt that any of us thought that we'd be sitting here a week later off of a loss to an 0-4 UCLA team. So, one, where's your psyche at? And two, the James Franklin era at Penn State, where do you stand? Actually, I don't care about your psyche. I know you feel like shit. The thing that I want to touch on, actually, because we started going back and forth in the group chat about it, is like the James Franklin era. And you push back on me saying like, well, it has been a success. You can't say it hasn't been a success. It's like, you brought up the sanctions. The first thing I want to say about the sanctions is like, I feel like Penn State has graduated past the situation. I feel like the sanction situation, I feel like Penn State, and tell me if you disagree with this or not, and we can continue on. I feel like they've graduated past not the excuse, but bringing up the sanctions. One, it was a dark time in Penn State history. Obviously, everybody knows that like what happened was inexcusable and disgusting. But they have turned that around as of this point. And whenever it gets brought, do you think that it's fair for Penn State fans and people to kind of like stop pinch holding them on this sanction thing? I feel like we're way past it. It's been over 10 years at this point.
I think multiple things can be true here at one time. Like, I think that I think right now we are past the sanctions. I think that. I will say this, like when we were texting about this, I was looking at it in the grand like entire scheme of the Penn State James Franklin era, and I think that there is a certain line that has to be drawn at where expectations have started to become greater than what they previously were. And so I think you disagreed, but I said that the grand scheme of the James Franklin era at Penn State has been a success. And my reasoning behind that is because of how poor of a situation they were in prior to him getting there. So he brought them out of the dark depths, and has been a winning coach in his career at Penn State, has won bowl games, but the expectations have changed along the way. So I think it's fair to say that the grand scheme of his time there has been a success, but it has not been a success as of like the last 2 to 3 years per se, especially this past season.
So the reason why I'm pushing back on that so heavily is like the James Franklin took on this coaching job in 2024 or 2014, excuse me.
Yeah.
2 years later, he won a Big Ten championship in 2016. You're telling me 9 years later, he's been back to one Big Ten championship. He's beaten Ohio State once in 2016. He's beaten Michigan once, and the last win was in 2021. Excuse me, or
yeah,
2021. So when he went year 2 and won the Big Ten, I felt like as of right there, he stamped himself as a different type of head coach where we are going to judge him based off of winning the big games, winning Big Ten championships, and potentially winning a national championship. And he does none of those things. So if you're like, I texted this to you, but like James Franklin at this point is like, although he goes and historically beats the bad teams, he didn't last weekend. When it matters most, he has pretty much been like a perennial loser. So that's where I'm saying, like, I think that I'm a little tired of the players. Like, whenever you get online after like a bad Penn State loss, all the players are like, oh, like James Franklin, nobody's sitting here saying, I'm sure James Franklin is an amazing guy. I'm sure that like he has like shaped young men's lives and that whole thing. But like when you just take the emotion out of it, like Penn State should be way more successful than what they are, just based off the recruiting classes they bring in, just based off the expectation going into every single season, the diehard fan base, the 100,000 plus people that pack the stadium, no matter who they play. Like that is they carry a different type of weight and expectation that the top schools in the country only can carry. And they are one of those. And the only thing that's holding them back at this point is a James Franklin.
So I'll kind of disagree with you on some of the things there, because if you look at the recruiting classes that Franklin has had up until this class that is seniors right now, they have had like somewhere from 10 to 15 as far as recruiting classes go. And yes, I'm not saying that's bad.
Is that not good?
No, that's good. That's good. But
Okay.
You got to look at the teams that he's losing to, and it's just the Michigans, Ohio States. It's teams that are better than Penn State. And it is coaching 100%. It's also players. Penn State hasn't had the same level of players and or coaching, to James Franklin's own fault, since that year that they beat Ohio State. I think that's probably like one of the best teams that they've had in the entire James Franklin era besides this year. Trace McSorley looking back on it, Trace McSorley is like one of the best college football quarterbacks that Penn State's had. They had Saquon, they had Gesicki. That team was littered with NFL players. And yes, that's how it is a lot of years for Penn State, but it felt like that year was a little bit different, and that was almost just like a lightning in the bottle year, and they just haven't had it. And a lot of that goes back on James Franklin, which is completely fair, and I think that he deserves blame for that too. But majority of his time at Penn State, he just hasn't had the same level of talent as opposed to like these Oregon teams, as Ohio State, as Michigan. And he's never been favorited in these games up until like the last 2 years. So I
just look at what Penn State has done. It really what it boils down to for me when I'm watching like on a week-to-week basis is just the quarterback position, because
it's bad.
The OC at Oregon can bring in somebody like a Bo Nix who was dead at Auburn and turn around his career and pump him out to be a first-round pick, and he is playing big-time football in the NFL. On the flip side of things, you have somebody like Dylan Gabriel, who was a legitimate journeyman his entire college career from UCF to Oklahoma to Oregon. And then it gets drafted in the 3rd or 4th round. I forget off the top of my head. And now he's playing in the NFL. It just doesn't make too much sense where you have that. He obviously came in at the tail end of a Christian Hackenberg, who was a 5-star. Trace McSorley was a 3-star. Again, he was probably the best one out of all of them. But like the Drew Allar was a 5-star, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, he was.
And it felt like that was the opportunity for them to finally be like, okay, James Franklin's got the 5-star quarterback. He's got that guy to be able to do all of this. And it has just, from 2022 to present, the Drew Allar tenure, even when he was not playing to now, you have to look at it and be like, okay, we were giving him a little bit of a pass maybe during like the Sean Clifford years when they like during like a 2020 when they started out like 0-5 or 0-4. I forget what it was. And now you are at a point where it's like, okay, you're bringing in upper echelon recruiting classes, like in the top 1% of like colleges. And you have the guy at quarterback allegedly, and you just haven't gotten it done. So I feel like from that, so if you want to talk about like the first, even in the middle though, like the James Franklin tenure, just like that's when they were like dropping weird games and like that whole shit. But I think that like what we saw James Franklin do this last 3 seasons with Drew Allar, I feel like it's like, okay, the experience is done. Like the James Franklin experiment in Penn State clearly has like a hard ceiling, and it's over.
Yeah, that's what I said at the very beginning of this. I said within the last 3 years is when he deserves like his most criticism for dropping the ball with these teams, because these last 3 years are when expectations have started to rise to a point where it's like, okay, Penn State's getting there. They're getting to a point where they're as good as these Ohio States, Oregons. They're knocking on the door. And then this year was supposed to be the year that they finally open the door and walk in, and it hasn't happened. So that's why I said at the beginning of this, I think the last 3 years are the 3 years where the criticism is rightfully deserved as to why isn't he getting this done? What needs to happen for them to finally break through? And I think that that's fair criticism, because from a quarterback perspective, Drew Allar has gotten worse since the day that he's stepped on campus. And I think that just as a unit, they have obviously looked terrible this season. I mean, they've had one good quarter of football that brought some excitement to the fan base, I would say, in that 4th quarter against Oregon. But this game against UCLA this past weekend was one of the most piss poor effort, coaching, all of the above from a Penn State team that I've seen. And one of the things that James Franklin was reliable for was how they bounced back after losing one of those big games. Is it always seems like those guys are ready to come and play the next game, and that wasn't the case. And you get to a point where it's okay, well, if you're not winning the big game and you're not getting these guys mentally ready and physically ready for a game where you're a 25-point favorite, what are you doing? So there's been a lot of like James Franklin talk as far as moving on. Should they stay? Should they go? I just don't see how this team takes any further steps from a 10-11 win team. 11 is being generous. A 10-win team to becoming an elite team with James Franklin there. And I tried to give benefit of the doubt for the longest time on this, because I was very adamant on, you don't know, like the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Like we've seen instances of teams where they've had success and they haven't been able to break through. Nebraska, for example, they are a team where they were winning a bunch of games. They were having success, but they weren't able to take that next step. They fired their coach. Nebraska's been on a decline. Now they're starting to come back, but they were on a decline for a handful of years now, and that's the risk that you run when you move on to a new coach. But I think that the Penn State football team as it stands has reached as good as it's going to get with James Franklin as the head coach.
Yeah, and two things too is one, you're paying Drew Allar a few $1 million to play quarterback, and he stinks. That's where you're gonna sit there, and this is what I always talk about with the NIL stuff.
And the coordinators, you're paying both coordinators a lot of money.
The Jim Knowles experience is a complete failure. That was hyped up from Penn State fans as being like the most ultimate like chess move hire of all time.
Yeah.
And of course it's fallen flat.
It's been bad.
The one thing that I am curious to see what happens is like what happens with the collectives, what happens with the NIL money, what happens with all of this, because you're looking at people who spend money out of their own pockets to put in Drew Allar's pockets, and he stinks and he's not good. And like, you're going to go back to the same guy who just wrote you a check for like $3 million and be like,
hey, sorry, couldn't do it this time.
We need another $3 million. What if he looks at you and just be like, well, I don't really trust what you do with my funds at this point, because you've clearly shown that you're not trustworthy with it. So there's a lot going on here. I want to highlight James Franklin's records, his entire tenure real quick. First year, 7-6, 2015, 7-6, 2016, 11-3, 2017, 11-2, 9-4 in 2018, 11-2 in 2019, 4-5 in 2020, 2021, 7-6, 2022, 11-2, 2023, 10-3, 2024, 13-3. And then now to start off this season, they're 3-2 and 0-2 in the conference. So even when you look at the snapshot of the James Franklin tenure, it's not dominant. Like, there are years where he can go and win 11 games, like that's fine. There's always multiple losses on the record. And there are even some years where they are down and almost 500. So that's where, when I looked back at the James Franklin, because in my head, it's always been like, oh, Penn State's always like really good. Like, they're a double-digit win team every single year. And that just really, that's not even true during the James Franklin tenure. So, this, I've been out on him for a long time. So welcome. It feels good. But yeah, I definitely think it's time to make a change in State College.
They're just in such a difficult spot because they went from Sandy Barber, I believe, was the AD at Penn State when the James Franklin deal was put in place. And she was not a great AD, and she moved on because they weren't good at anything when she was there.
I'm just kidding.
Besides wrestling. And then they brought in Pat Kraft, who I think is great. I think that he cares about the sports and he is willing to do whatever it takes to put all of the athletics at Penn State in a spot to be successful. But where do you draw the line? Because the buyout that he is tasked with for the James Franklin deal is like $50 million. And is that something that you want to take on? And if the answer is if the answer is no, then fans, you better get used to it, because we, as a unit, Penn State NIL and Penn State alumni, they're not dishing out Texas A&M money. And the last time that there was a deal that got bought out this big that I can remember was when Texas A&M bought out Jimbo Fisher. Wasn't it like $40-something million?
I can check
if you remember what it is.
His buyout was $77 million.
$77 million, and that's coming from Texas A&M, which is like historically known for the oil money in Texas and just having absurd amounts of alumni funding. So that's not how Penn State is built. So I just want people to prepare themselves for James Franklin to be the head coach next season, because I don't think they're going to buy him out at $50 million. I don't think that they're built for that. I know they just signed this huge Adidas deal, but that money goes to all the sports, not just football. So it's not like football can, and I know that football makes the most money at 95% of the schools in college athletics, but it's not like they can just take half of that contract and say, yeah, we're just going to use this to buy out James Franklin. So I just want people to be prepared for that.
I'm sure they can make it work. I don't think like the Adidas money would have to be the way to buy out James Franklin. I'm sure they have the money on hand to buy out James Franklin. It's the question. It's the matter of fact of the question is if they want to do it or not.
I don't think they're going to. I think that's a lofty price tag on top of them already being like, okay, it's been like, didn't go as planned this year, but look at what he's done. I think that's how they'll look at it.
Yeah, and we just talked about it and we went over it, and what he has done so far hasn't been that impressive. You think otherwise, I think completely different, but regardless, Penn State lost to UCLA this weekend.
I just spit it. Good girl, we're getting paper as a passion. Collect the stacks and bring it back, man, and take vision.